Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. This whole mess went down around early 2023, right in the thick of that economic downturn everyone was dealing with. It's the kind of thing that would probably ring a bell with my old coworkers. Let's just hope none of them stumble across this thread, huh? It's a tale about someone whose drive outpaced their integrity and respect for the law, and how it came back to bite them. At that time, I was managing a team at a decent-sized company. One day, they assigned a new member to my group. Let's call her Shady. Shady was in her late 20s, pretty fresh out of college. She was one of those people who could gab endlessly about her bold ideas and aspirations, but never seemed to have much to show for it. Whenever I brought up clients complaining about her lack of responsiveness, she always had an excuse at the ready. The clients were too demanding. Her workload was overwhelming. She probably sent an email that landed in spam. The blame never fell on her. It reached a point where, after one of our monthly meetings, I called her into my office and leveled with her. If she couldn't keep up with her tasks, she needed to give us a heads up so we could redistribute resources and prevent things from slipping through the cracks. I'll admit, I came down on her pretty firmly. Her performance was dragging the whole team down, and keeping everyone on track was literally my job. I get that people can be swamped, that personal stuff can bleed into work, and that sometimes folks need a helping hand. But if every time I ask about a project, you insist, yep, all good, under control, only for it all to unravel later with you pinning the blame on the client, we've got a problem. I made it clear that I wouldn't initiate any formal disciplinary action yet, but from then on, I wanted her to check in with me for 10 minutes every Monday morning to go over her objectives for the week and flag any clients she might need support with. I knew being micromanaged wasn't fun, so I aimed to keep these check-ins succinct and just offer assistance where needed. Still, she clearly despised me after that, and it seems she was hatching her own little revenge scheme. Part of my role involved access to a company purchasing card, which wasn't in my name, but was available for me to use. I had that card for making minor office purchases or spending up to $500 on client-related expenses. The card lived in an office I shared with another team manager, accessible to both of us as needed. One day, I get a call from accounting asking about some irregular charges on the card, a Photoshop subscription, a couple Uber Eats orders, an HBO subscription, and so on. I told them I knew nothing about those and to check with the other manager. Apparently, my colleague was also clueless because come Monday, I got summoned to the big boss's office. After we had both denied involvement, accounting had started contacting Adobe, Uber, and the like to trace the origin of those transactions. Turns out, not only were the accounts registered in my name, but they also used an email address incorporating my name, like something along the lines of john.doe3@domain.com. I can't adequately describe that meeting. I felt physically ill. I couldn't make sense of what was happening. I was so blindsided I hardly knew what to say. I felt like I was about to lose my job, and I couldn't fathom how that was even possible. The director just kept going on about how access to the card was a privilege, how I had signed an agreement regarding its appropriate use, and so forth. I denied misusing it and explained that I had no clue how those expenses occurred. The boss listened, but I could tell he wasn't entirely convinced. Truthfully, I was almost gaslighting myself, wondering if I had somehow saved the card details somewhere and my wife had accidentally used them or something. It was a nightmare, and I found myself apologizing profusely, saying, I don't know what happened here, but I assure you, I know those expenses aren't appropriate uses of company funds. There must have been some mistake. Can I please get the details so I can look into this? And so on. When I finally escaped that office, job barely intact, Shady was waiting right outside my door. She was grinning from ear to ear and sweetly asked if I was ready for our morning check-in. I told her something had come up and we'd reschedule for tomorrow. Then she said, "Oh, will you even be in tomorrow?" Confused, because I didn't realize I was caught up in some revenge plot at the time, I just replied, "Yes. Why wouldn't I be?" She simply sipped her tea and said, "Oh, no reason," before turning and heading back to her desk. Something felt off, but I was still reeling from the meeting with the boss, so I spent the next couple of hours calling my wife, calling Adobe, doing the same legwork accounting had done. It quickly became apparent that someone had been using my name and the company card to rack up all sorts of online expenses. Had I been hacked or something? Was my personal info being peddled on the dark web and these hackers just really wanted Photoshop and Wendy's delivered? It was the Uber Eats that gave her away. After explaining the whole situation over the phone and providing my name for the account details, the rep told me where the food deliveries had been sent. It was right here in our city, which immediately ruled out any notion of my data being sold online or something. Now I was suspicious and angry. I try not to assume the worst about people, but at this point, I did. Trusting my gut, I pulled up Shady's employee file and checked her home address. I dropped a pin on that location in Google Maps, then looked up the address Uber Eats had given me. It was right on her damn block. I was livid. When she clocked out for the day, I got IT to grant me access to her laptop. Sure enough, when I opened her company email account, listed under her saved accounts was john.doe3@domain.com. She had been somewhat clever about certain aspects. The IP address she used was the office's, which would have traced back to me. She even had the food delivered to a different address than her own place. She had created that fake email address too, but saving her passwords on a work computer, that was an amateur mistake. I called the boss that night and explained what I'd uncovered, keeping the IT guy with me to corroborate that I hadn't just fabricated everything by logging into her computer myself. The next day, the boss summoned her to his office and fired her in spectacular fashion. I swear there were literal tumbleweeds blowing through the halls. As she walked out of there all misty-eyed, I made sure to be standing in the hallway sipping a cup of tea. It had gone cold while I waited for her dramatic exit, but it still tasted pretty sweet. I'm hoping she went straight home after that, because if she did, she would have received a nice goodbye meal from Wendy's, courtesy of Uber Eats, paid for by my personal card, of course. Revenge and justice. They're different sides of the same coin, right? In the end, she got canned. The boss apologized, and we were on good terms when I left for a new gig that October. Shady never apologized, and I haven't seen her since. The boss decided not to involve the police, and neither did I. I just didn't want to deal with the hassle. The next one is an entitled people story. When my wife and I bought our house last year, we thought we had found our perfect slice of suburban paradise. The neighborhood was quiet, the schools were great, and our backyard opened up to a peaceful green space. Little did we know that green space would soon become ground zero for an all-out war with our obnoxious neighbor. The problem started about 3 months after we moved in. I was sipping my morning coffee when I glanced out the window and did a double take. There, on the edge of the community green space, was a huge metal shed. I rubbed my eyes thinking I was seeing things, but nope, that monstrosity was really there. I threw on some clothes and marched outside to get a closer look. This thing was gigantic, like an airplane hangar plunked down in the middle of the neighborhood. It completely ruined the view and serene atmosphere. As I stood there fuming, my neighbor Gary emerged from the shed, grinning like he had just won the lottery. "Morning!" he called out cheerfully. "What do you think of my new storage shed? She's a real beaut, huh?" I was speechless. Was this guy for real? Before I could gather my thoughts, Gary started rambling about his plans to use the shed for his landscaping business equipment. He droned on while I stared slack-jawed at this hulking eyesore he had erected literally overnight. "Gary," I finally interrupted, "did you get approval to build this thing?" "Nah, don't need it," he scoffed. "My property, my rules." With that, he disappeared into the shed, leaving me absolutely furious. This wasn't just his property. It bordered community land, and there was no way this monstrosity met zoning regulations. Over the next few weeks, I tried reasoning with Gary multiple times, but he simply didn't care. In his mind, he was entitled to do whatever he pleased without considering how it affected the neighborhood. Fed up with his attitude, I decided to fight back. Fetty. I brought the matter up at the next homeowner association meeting and was relieved to find I wasn't the only one outraged. We all agreed to pitch in for a lawyer to determine if Gary had violated any local zoning laws. And sure enough, after reviewing the regulations, our lawyer confirmed that the shed was illegal on multiple counts. Not only did it exceed size limits for an accessory structure, but Gary also failed to obtain the proper permits. Armed with this information, the homeowner association issued Gary an official notice, giving him 30 days to remove the shed or face legal action. Well, Gary flew into a rage when he got that notice. He stormed around the neighborhood ranting and raving about his rights being violated. At one point, he even threatened to sue me for harassment. When the 30-day deadline passed with the shed still standing, we had no choice but to take Gary to court. The trial itself was quick and painless. Gary represented himself and spent most of the time rambling incoherently while our lawyer calmly presented the facts. In the end, the judge upheld the zoning violations, declared the shed illegal, and ordered Gary to remove it immediately. Gary was livid and threatened to just abandon the shed out of spite. Fed up with his childish antics, I offered to remove it myself if he signed over ownership. Amazingly, he agreed. I guess he figured it was easier than following the judge's orders. The day the work crew arrived to dismantle that monstrosity was one of the most satisfying days of my life. As I watched that hideous shed get torn down piece by piece, I couldn't help but smile. We had finally restored order and balance to the neighborhood. In the end, I chose to repurpose the scrap metal from the shed into a beautiful community garden. It was the perfect symbol of how we transformed an angry, negative situation into something beautiful and beneficial for everyone. And the best part? Gary was left simmering in his own bitterness, knowing his arrogance had literally been torn down. It just goes to show, you can't let obnoxious people walk all over you. If you're patient and determined, justice and common sense can prevail. All's well that ends well, right? The next one is a petty revenge story. My coworker, let's call him Carl, works on site 2 days a week and works from home 3 days a week. Nobody else in our team is allowed to work from home, and yet management won't force him to work on site all 5 days like the rest of us. He blames childcare and travel expenses as reasons he cannot be on site all 5 days. But many of our team face similar issues, and all of them make it on site 5 days a week, every week. On a semi-frequent basis, he'll give one excuse or another as to why he cannot be on site on the days he is supposed to be, and therefore has to work from home. Plumbing emergency, child is sick or has an appointment, the dentist, there's always something. But our manager has no backbone and just wants to be everyone's mate, so won't step up and do anything about Carl. As a result, Carl is not well liked in our team. There are some members of the team who have stated they see him so infrequently, they wouldn't be able to pick him out of a lineup. I am the person who takes the brunt of all of this, as I share an office and duties with Carl. I am pretty strict on the division of work to make it as fair as possible, but the balance is never truly equal. I have to handle almost everything that is on site, inducing some very time-consuming postal duties, and end up taking most of the calls because I cannot stand to just let the phone ring. Yes, the phone does transfer to Carl if I don't pick up, but the phone rings for a long time before it cuts to his work mobile cell. In recent months, I have put my foot down with management about making sure Carl is on site on the days he is supposed to be, and for a while, it worked. However, he is called out sick twice on those days. Once during half-term, UK school holiday, and once during the Easter break. Of course, nobody can prove he wasn't sick, but the timing was very suspicious. Also, during the Easter break, on the days Carl was working from home, he was left unable to take any calls as his work mobile cell had suddenly stopped working. It would take a while for a replacement to arrive, be set up, and management did not force him to be on site despite him not having a functioning work mobile cell. A combination of these factors, plus some annual leave Carl took, meant I had over 2 weeks of taking every call and doing the large majority of all our duties. When I confronted Carl about the unfairness of all of this, he was dismissive and unapologetic. To add insult to injury, when he was next on site, after I went above my manager's head to force Carl to be on site until he had a new work mobile cell, he had the audacity to complain about the job and how he needs to find something better as he's being treated so poorly. It took everything in my power to not roll my eyes right out of my head. Now for the revenge. Yesterday, Carl was working from home. Yesterday, IT installed new phones in every office. They are not the easiest phones to use, and the instruction manual gives basically no information about how the phones work. So I asked my friend in IT to go over it with me, specifically how to change the ringtone and the volume of the ring. My friend in IT also helped me set up a PIN for the phone, and only those that know the PIN can make changes to the phone's setup. On Monday, I leave for a 3-week holiday. On Monday, Carl is on site and will be every day that I am on my holiday. Upper management will be checking to ensure he is in every day. On Friday, before I leave, I am changing the ringtone to the most annoying ring possible. I'll also be turning up the volume as high as possible, and then I'll be locking it all in place with a pin only I will know. I've already tested the phones, and the sound of the ring at the highest volume all but vibrates off the walls. When I get home, I will be looking for a new job. I was waiting until after the long holiday to start looking. Duck you, Carl. As a note about why Carl is able to get away with all of this, my manger is a pushover, as stated, and just wants to be everyone's mate. Why higher-ups don't try and do more, I do not know. But it may be because employees here are very well protected and very difficult to get rid of. The process to get rid of problem employees can sometimes take years. There are currently several problem employees here that are able to get away with far too much, including one woman who bullies everyone and another is always off sick, to the point where they are off far more frequently than they are in. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This happened back when the Earth was young and MTV still played music videos in the ancient age known as 1997. I was 13 and spending yet another weekend helping my dad with yard work and home improvement projects. Not complaining. I learned a lot about home repair, and rather than get a crappy teen job in retail, my dad paid me to assist him up until I left for college. Now, just because I didn't hate it doesn't mean I was a little 13-year-old shit, however. On this day, we were putting up a trellis in the garden for plants to grow up. Simple job, sink 2 posts, cement them in place, and fit the trellis between them. My dad gave me a post hole digger, which if you're not familiar with, looks like someone glued chopsticks to a pistachio shell so you could open and close it with a hinge. He showed me the spot for the first post and said dig it as deep as you can. So I went and made a foot-deep hole, thinking that was enough to sink the 6-foot posts we had. He comes back and tells me not to be lazy and dig deeper. In fact, keep digging until I tell you it's deep enough. So that's where my malicious compliance came in. I knew he would be back from the garage in about half an hour, so I went to town on this hole. I didn't stop for a break and just kept digging until the post hole digger fit in the hole completely, and I couldn't open it to lift dirt out. At that point, I taped a spade to a branch and made the hole even deeper. When he came back, he said something along the lines of, "Let's see if you did it properly this time," and he drops the 6-foot post into the hole where it promptly disappears. There was a momentary look of shock on his face, then he started laughing, like bent over, can't catch your breath laughing. To this day, I have never seen the man laugh as hard as that. When he was done, he told me that I guess I did what he told me, but now I would have to figure out how to fish the post out of the hole. Luckily, it was only a foot or so below the surface, and we got it out easily enough. To this day, my dad still tells this story as a warning about giving vague instructions. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.